Hey y'all, my name is Simone Elaine Burgess, and I am from Memphis, Tennessee, born and raised. And if you know anything about Memphis, you know that we take two things very seriously down here: our food and our family. And on one particular Saturday in July, both of those things got absolutely destroyed in the same afternoon. I am 30 years old. I work as a dental hygienist. I live 20 minutes from where I grew up. And I come from one of those big, loud, beautiful Southern families where everybody knows everybody's business. Somebody is always cooking something. And the family BBQ is basically a sacred institution. I want to tell y'all about the BBQ. The BBQ of all BBQs. The one we still cannot get through a family dinner without somebody bringing up, even now, years later. The one that changed the way our whole family looked at each other and at ourselves. Grab your plate, fix your drink, and come sit with me. Because this one is something else entirely. First, let me paint y'all a picture of what the Burgess family BBQ actually looks like, because context matters here. My Aunt Ruthie, Ruth Annette Burgess Holloway, has hosted the annual family summer cookout at her house in South Memphis for going on 23 years. This is not a small gathering. We are talking about a sprawling backyard, 4 folding tables end to end. Enough food to feed a small country, and somewhere between 40 and 60 people, depending on who brought who and who decided to show up unannounced. There's always ribs. There's always Aunt Ruthie's famous potato salad that she will not share the recipe for and will take to her grave. There's always somebody's macaroni and cheese that somebody else is low-key judging. There's always sweet tea in the big orange cooler. There are always children running through the sprinkler. There is always an uncle on the grill who thinks he's in charge, and an aunt who is actually in charge but lets him think otherwise. There is always music, old school R&B, some gospel, maybe some old country if my Uncle Terrence gets hold of somebody's phone. It is loud and beautiful and chaotic, and it is one of my absolute favorite days of the year. Now, the Burgess family is big. And when I say big, I mean sprawling, branching, connected by marriage and half and twice removed big. There are people at these BBQs who I only see once a year, and honestly could not pick out of a lineup in February. We have first cousins, second cousins, cousins by marriage, family friends who have been coming so long they might as well be cousins, neighbors who got folded in somewhere along the way. It's a whole thing. And in the middle of all of that glorious chaos, this particular summer, 2 worlds were about to collide in a way that nobody on earth could have predicted. My cousin Tanya is something special. She's 34, 4 years older than me. And she is the kind of woman who walks into a room and the room reorganizes itself around her. Tall, beautiful, sharp as a tack. The kind of laugh that makes you laugh even when you don't know what's funny yet. Tanya and I have been close our whole lives. She's more like a big sister than a cousin. Growing up, she was always the one pulling me into things I probably shouldn't have been doing, and then talking us both out of trouble with a straight face and a smile. Now, Tanya's love life had been, let's say, an adventure over the years. She'd had a few serious relationships that didn't work out, a couple of situations that shouldn't have gone as long as they did, and a solid 2-year stretch where she'd sworn off dating entirely and was, as she put it, in a relationship with myself and thriving. We supported all of it, so when she called me in June, about 6 weeks before the BBQ, to tell me she'd met someone, I was happy for her, really genuinely happy. His name was Derek Allen Pruitt. She'd met him at a work conference in Nashville. He lived in Nashville but traveled to Memphis regularly for work. They'd been seeing each other for about 2 months. She said he was charming, attentive, smart, and fine. Her word, not mine, though from the photo she texted me, I was not going to argue. I really like him, Simone, she said. And Tanya did not say that lightly. Like I actually really like him. Then bring him to the BBQ, I said. Let Aunt Ruthie feed him and we'll see what he's made of. She laughed. That is literally the most accurate test I can think of. So she invited him. And he said yes. Now here's where I need to introduce you to another branch of the Burgess family tree. Specifically, my cousin by marriage, Denise Holloway Pruitt. Yes, Pruitt, hold on to that, had married into the family about 4 years prior when she married Aunt Ruthie's son, Marcus. Denise was sweet, quiet, a little reserved, the kind of woman who shows up early to help set up and stays late to help clean without being asked. She was from Nashville originally, had moved to Memphis when she and Marcus got together, and had folded herself into the family with genuine warmth and humility. Denise also had a younger sister, Keisha, who came to the BBQ every year with Denise. Keisha lived in Nashville. Keisha was funny and outgoing, and the kind of energy that makes a party better just by showing up. And Denise, now I need you to stay with me here, had been going through a quiet but very real personal situation over the previous several months. She and Marcus had confided in Aunt Ruthie that their marriage was under some strain. Nothing explosive, nothing public, just the kind of private difficulty that long-term couples sometimes hit. They were working on it. They were trying. But there was something else that Denise had shared only with her sister Keisha. Something she hadn't even fully told Marcus yet, because she was still trying to process it herself. Denise had recently discovered that before she married Marcus, in a period when she'd been living in Nashville, and Marcus was still in Memphis, and they were in an on-again, off-again situation, she had briefly, for about 3 months, been seeing someone, a man named Derek. A man who had told her he was single. A man who had been attentive and charming, and then suddenly, without explanation, had gone cold and disappeared from her life. A man whose last name was Pruitt. Are y'all following me? Because I need y'all to follow me right now. The day of the BBQ was a gorgeous Saturday. 82 degrees, light breeze, sky so blue it looked painted. Aunt Ruthie's backyard was already set up beautifully by 10 in the morning. Tables covered in plastic red and white checkered cloths, coolers full of ice and drinks. The smoker already going with my Uncle Terrence standing beside it, wearing his grill sergeant apron, like he'd been awarded a medal. People started arriving around noon. Cars filling up the street. Children tumbling out of back seats. Covered dishes coming through the gate. The volume rising steadily. Laughter, music. Somebody's baby crying. Somebody else's kid running full speed through the yard and being told to slow down by approximately 7 different adults. I got there around 12:30, helped Aunt Ruthie carry some things out from the kitchen, set up the sweet tea station, did my rounds, hugging necks, catching up, complimenting food I hadn't tasted yet. Denise and Marcus were already there. Denise looked a little tired around the eyes, but was smiling and helping out. Marcus was deep in conversation with my Uncle Roy about something sports-related. Keisha, Denise's sister, arrived shortly after, big sunglasses and a great dress, immediately making everybody around her laugh within 30 seconds of walking through the gate. I was standing near the food tables talking to my cousin Brianna when Tanya arrived. She came through the gate looking absolutely gorgeous. Sundress, natural hair out in full, glowing in that way people glow when they're happy about something. And right beside her, hand on the small of her back, was Derek. Tall, handsome, big smile, confident without being arrogant, or at least, that's how it read from 20 feet away. I waved. Tanya caught my eye and grinned. She steered him toward Aunt Ruthie first, which was the correct move. You always greet the host. And I watched Aunt Ruthie shake his hand and look him up and down in that way she has. The assessment that takes about 4 seconds and is completely accurate 100% of the time. Everything was fine. For about 11 minutes. I was not watching when it happened. I was at the food table making my plate. But my cousin Brianna was watching. Brianna sees everything, always has. And she told me the sequence of events later in such precise detail that I could see it like a movie. Tanya was bringing Derek around to meet people. Working the yard the way you do at a family event, stopping here, stopping there, introductions and small talk. They were making their way toward the back of the yard where a cluster of people were gathered near the smoker. Keisha was standing in that cluster. Now Keisha had met Derek. Not officially, not formally, but she had seen him. Once, briefly, when she had visited Denise in Nashville during that period when Denise was seeing him. She hadn't spent time with him. Hadn't had a real conversation, but she had seen his face. And when Tanya and Derek walked up to the group and Tanya started making introductions, Brianna said she watched Keisha's face go from smiling and open to absolutely, completely still, like someone had pressed pause on her. Derek's eyes landed on Keisha, and Brianna said something moved across his face too. Just a flash, just a flicker, there and gone, before his smile came back up. Keisha said, very quietly, almost to herself, "No." Tanya said, "Keisha, this is Derek." And Keisha said, still quiet, still very controlled, "Derek Pruitt?" And Brianna said the air around that little group just changed, like the temperature dropped 5 degrees in a second. Derek said, "Have we met?" And Keisha looked at him for a long moment and said, "I'm Denise's sister." Brianna came and got me from the food table. She leaned in close and said, "Simone, you need to come with me right now." I put down my plate and followed her. By the time we got to the back of the yard, Keisha had pulled Tanya a few steps away from the group and was talking to her in a low, urgent voice. Derek was standing slightly apart, hands in his pockets, expression carefully neutral in a way that in retrospect told you everything. I couldn't hear exactly what Keisha was saying to Tanya at first, but I watched Tanya's face. Tanya's face went through about 6 different things in about 30 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, something searching, like she was running calculations. And then a kind of stillness that I had only seen on Tanya's face one other time in our lives, the day she found out her daddy was sick. A stillness that means something has just fundamentally shifted, and the world on the other side of this moment will be different from the world on this side of it. Then Tanya walked over to Derek. She stood in front of him and she said, and this I heard clearly because by now several people nearby had gone quiet. "Keisha says you dated her sister Denise, in Nashville, about 5 years ago." Derek said, "I know a lot of people in Nashville." Tanya said, "Yes or no, Derek?" He was quiet for 1 second too long, and Tanya said, "Where is Denise? Somebody go get Denise." Denise was in the kitchen helping Aunt Ruthie when someone went to get her. I was told later that Aunt Ruthie tried to follow because she could tell from the look on the person's face that something was wrong, but Denise said, "Stay here, Aunt Ruthie. I'll be right back." Calm as anything. Denise came out into the backyard and walked toward the group. She was carrying a dish towel, still drying her hands. She looked at the small crowd that had formed without meaning to. People who had drifted closer the way people do when the energy in a space shifts. She looked at Keisha. She looked at Tanya. And then she looked at Derek. And y'all, I will never forget what happened to Denise's face in that moment. It wasn't shock. That's the thing that surprised me most. It wasn't the face of someone who was blindsided. It was something older and heavier than shock, like recognition, like something she had half known somewhere deep down, but had never let herself fully look at. She said his name, just his name, quietly. He said, "Denise, hey." Hey, that's what he said. Hey, like they'd run into each other at a grocery store. Tanya looked between the two of them and said, very carefully, very evenly, "How do y'all know each other?" Denise turned to Tanya with an expression I can only describe as exhausted and sorrowful, and said, "We dated, in Nashville, before I met Marcus." Tanya said, "For how long?" "About 3 months. He disappeared. Stopped returning my calls. I never knew why." Tanya turned back to Derek, and now the yard was really quiet. The music was still playing somewhere, but it felt far away. She said, "Were you seeing other people when you were with Denise?" He started to say something. Tanya said, "Don't." He stopped. She said, "Were you seeing other people when you were with me?" The silence that followed that question was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. It did not all come out in the backyard. Some of it came out later, over the next few days, as Tanya did what Tanya does, which is get very quiet and very thorough, and find out every single thing there is to find out. But here is what we know. Derek Allen Pruitt was not the single, available, straightforward man he had presented himself to be. To Tanya, to Denise, or apparently to at least 2 other women whose existence came to light over the following week. He was a man who maintained multiple relationships simultaneously, in multiple cities, with great care and considerable skill. Nashville, Memphis, at least 1 woman in Jackson. He was not technically married. That part of the story I told in the title, I'll be honest with you, is a little bit of creative license for the sake of the thumbnail. What he was something in some ways worse. A man who had made multiple women feel chosen and special and singular while ensuring none of them knew the others existed. A man who used distance and busy schedules and just enough charm to keep every plate spinning and every woman believing she was the one. When Tanya laid out what she'd found, sitting across from him in a parking lot 2 days after the BBQ because she refused to have that conversation in her home, he didn't really deny it. He offered explanations that weren't explanations. He talked about his childhood, his commitment issues, his fear of being truly known. He cried at one point, which Tanya said she found neither moving nor convincing. She said what she found most telling was that even then, even caught, even exposed, he was still performing, still calculating the angle, still watching her face to see what was landing. She said, "The saddest part is that somewhere in the middle of all the performance, I think there's an actual person in there, but I'm not interested in excavating for him." She drove away and didn't look back. The BBQ broke up early that year. People trickled out with that specific awkward energy of a gathering that has witnessed something it wasn't prepared for. There were whispered conversations at car doors. A lot of long hugs. Aunt Ruthie stood at her gate and squeezed every person's hand as they left, like she was holding the family together by sheer physical contact. Uncle Terrence, God bless him, was the last to know what had happened. He'd been at the grill through the whole thing. And when somebody finally filled him in, he said, with complete sincerity, "Did he at least eat first? Because that's a lot of drama on an empty stomach." Which broke some of the tension in a way that only Uncle Terrence could. Denise talked to Marcus that evening. All of it, the history with Derek, the shock of seeing him, everything. Marcus, steady, quiet Marcus, listened to all of it and then said, "That man is a fool." And then he held his wife, and they sat with it together. It was actually, Denise told me later, one of the most honest and connected evenings she and Marcus had shared in months. Something about the shared absurdity of it cracked something open between them. Sometimes the universe delivers its lessons in the most wildly inconvenient packaging. Keisha called me the week after, and we talked for 2 hours. She said she felt guilty, like somehow seeing Derek and saying something had caused damage. I told her the damage was already there. She just turned on the light. And Tanya, my big sister cousin, the woman who walked through that gate glowing 6 weeks after telling me she really liked someone for the first time in years. Tanya took about 3 weeks to be quiet and still and process. She didn't want advice. She didn't want anyone to fix it. She just wanted space to feel it. Then one evening she called me and said, "Okay, I'm good." I said, "You sure?" She said, "I'm not naive enough to think I'll never meet another Derek, but I'm smart enough now to know the signs a little faster." I said, "What are the signs?" She said, "He never let me see where he lived, Simone. 2 months, and I never once went to his actual home. I made excuses for that in my head. I told myself it was because he traveled so much, but a man who lets you into his life, lets you into his space." She was quiet a second. I knew something was off. I just liked him enough to not look directly at it. Y'all, I have thought about this story a lot since it happened, about what it means, what it teaches, and I think there are a few things worth sitting with. The first is this: trust what you notice, not what you fear, not what your insecurity whispers to you in the dark, but what you actually observe, what you actually see. Tanya noticed something. She talked herself out of it because she wanted to believe in the man she thought she was getting. Most of us have done the same thing at one point or another. We see the yellow flag, and we repaint it green in our minds, because the alternative is hard. The second thing is about community. What happened at that BBQ was humiliating and painful and messy. But it happened in the middle of 40 people who loved each other. And when it was over, those 40 people didn't scatter. They squeezed each other's hands at the gate, and they checked in on each other all week, and they held the people who needed holding. That matters. That is worth something enormous. And the third thing, the one I keep coming back to, is about Denise and Marcus. How a man appearing in the wrong place at the wrong time actually cracked open a conversation that two people who loved each other needed to have. Sometimes the disruption is the medicine. Sometimes the thing that breaks something open is the same thing that lets the air in. Life is strange that way. Strange and specific and occasionally absolutely unhinged. I love my family. Every loud, complicated, casserole-carrying, sweet tea-drinking one of them. And I will see them all again next summer at Aunt Ruthie's backyard. Ribs on the grill, kids in the sprinkler, Uncle Terrence in his apron. And we will not be inviting any guests we haven't background checked this time. I'm just saying, thank you so much for being here today, y'all. Leave me a comment. I want to hear from you. And share this with someone who needs a reminder that the truth always finds its way to the surface, one way or another. Take good care. I'll see you in the next one.